A little while ago, a rather consequential report was released over in the state of Wisconsin that flew a bit under the radar because at that time the news cycle was just so hectic. However, when I was cleaning up my folder, well, I came across the report and I believe that it warrants a revisit because it concerns the integrity of our election system. You see, the special counsel who was appointed to study the 2020 election over in Wisconsin, he submitted his official report, which you can see up on your screen, and he determined that the millions of dollars which Mark Zuckerberg spent on the Wisconsin election violated the laws in regards to bribery. That is, by the way, besides multiple other issues that he found, which included unconstitutional drop boxes, illegal directives from the Election Commission in regards to nursing homes, as well as problems with the voter rolls themselves. However, to start with, let's discuss the Mark Zuckerberg portion of this report. The special counsel found that the millions of dollars that Mark Zuckerberg spent on the Wisconsin election violated the state's laws in regards to bribery, or to be more specific, the almost $9 million of Mark Zuckerberg's grant funding, which went exclusively to 5 Democratic strongholds within the state of Wisconsin, it violated the election code's prohibition on bribery. Now, before I dive into the details of what's reported here, let me give you a bit of background on both the report, how it came to be, as well as the Zuckerberg funding. You might remember that in August of 2 years ago, in August of 2021, the Speaker of the Wisconsin Assembly, who is a lawmaker by the name of Robin Vos, he authorized the office of the special counsel, which was headed up by a retired state Supreme Court justice named Michael Gableman, to investigate all the concerns regarding election integrity that came out of the 2020 presidential race. And so again, that was back in August of 2021. Then, just 3 months later, in November of that same year, the special counsel delivered his first interim report to the Wisconsin Assembly. And while he was giving that update, he told the Assembly that, at least in his opinion, it was clear that some form of cover-up was taking place. Here's specifically what Mr. Michael Gableman, the special counsel in Wisconsin, as well as the former state Supreme Court justice, here's what he said to the Wisconsin Assembly, again back in November of 2021. Quote, "Green Bay Mayor Eric Genrich and Madison Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway have chosen to ignore the subpoenas issued by the Wisconsin Assembly because they have no intention of answering uncomfortable questions about what they did with the millions of dollars in Zuckerberg money that they took." Now, in that statement, as you likely noticed, Mr. Gableman mentioned the millions of dollars that came from Mark Zuckerberg, and this requires a little bit of context. There was a report released by the Thomas More Society. Here it is up on screen for you to see. And this report detailed how Mark Zuckerberg donated approximately $400 million in order to quote-unquote help out the 2020 election. And the bulk of that money was given to an organization called the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which is a nonprofit that was started by former managers as well as former staff members of another organization called the New Organizing Institute, which was a progressive nonprofit. And so what that means in practice is that Mark Zuckerberg donated about $400 million to an organization which is both led as well as staffed primarily by Democratic activists in order to quote-unquote help out the 2020 election. Now, you might be wondering, because it's the next logical question, how exactly were they helping out? Well, according to their website, here's what the Center for Tech and Civic Life aims to do. Quote, "We harness the promise of technology to modernize the American voting experience. What you get: high-performing election offices, increased public confidence and trust, a more resilient and adaptive election system, better informed voters." Now, that all sounds well and good. However, what did they specifically do in the year 2020 to achieve those stated goals? Well, according to that report by the Thomas More Society, what they did was that prior to the election, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, they began sending their own agents into Democrat strongholds of different states in order to recruit the local leaders there, have those local leaders fill out and prepare grant applications so that those applications can be sent back to the Center for Tech and Civic Life and the requested money can be sent back over to the Democrat strongholds in order to help them get out the vote. As an example of how this worked in practice, according to the report, the Center for Tech and Civic Life gave $100,000 of Zuckerberg money to Mr. Corey Mason, who is the mayor of Racine, Wisconsin, in order to have him go to 4 other cities in the area, and specifically those cities were all Democrat strongholds, and in those cities, he recruited the local leaders there, helped them to develop a plan, and then they sent in a request to the Center for Tech and Civic Life for a larger grant in order to execute on that plan. And indeed, the Zuckerberg money just kept rolling in. According to the report, back in June of 2020, which is now 5 months before the actual election itself, the cities of Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, Racine, as well as Kenosha, they submitted their plans, and then they subsequently received approximately $9 million to implement those plans. Now, if you are a generous person, you might look at that situation and say, hey, you know what? That sounds like a good thing. The Center for Tech and Civic Life is just using Mark Zuckerberg's money to help out the election officials, subsidize their work, and make elections better, while at the same time saving taxpayers money. Sounds like a good thing, which could have been the case, at least in theory. However, according to the report by the Thomas More Society, the money flowed overwhelmingly to Democrat strongholds by a ratio of about 10 to 1, meaning that for every $10 that went to a Democrat stronghold, only $1 was spent in a Republican area. Here's specifically what the report said on this front. Quote, Mark Zuckerberg's money allowed these Democrat strongholds to spend roughly $47 per voter compared to $4 to $7 per voter in traditionally Republican areas of the state. And the big question that has been hanging in the air since the year 2020 is whether this was actually legal or not. Because according to the Help America Vote Act, which you can see up on screen for yourself, it requires that state election plans must be submitted to the federal government for approval. Specifically, they must be approved to make sure that all resources are available equally to all voters. And so that is the full background on this new report, which dropped over in the state of Wisconsin, which, as I mentioned earlier, determined that Mark Zuckerberg's election money did, in fact, violate Wisconsin state election laws in respect to bribery. And so what this new report says is that Mark Zuckerberg, as well as his wife, Ms. Priscilla Chan, they provided financing that allowed the Center for Tech and Civic Life to specifically, quote, offer nearly $9 million in Zuckbucks to Milwaukee, Madison, Racine, Kenosha, and Green Bay counties in exchange. The Zuckerberg Five, as the report called these 5 counties, in effect operated Democratic get-out-the-vote efforts. Those grant funds then paid for illegal drop boxes to be placed in Democrat voting strongholds. And in regards to the drop boxes that they mentioned, this was another area of concern that the report highlighted as well. Because according to Wisconsin state election laws, Wisconsin citizens, otherwise, by the way, known as Wisconsinites, they are limited to casting ballots either in person or by mail unless they have some very special circumstances, making ballot drop boxes in and of themselves unconstitutional. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I wanted to mention that the sponsor for today's episode is a super cool company called Sekur. And they're a cool company for people that actually care about their privacy. Because listen, if you don't think that these giant tech conglomerates and all these different alphabet agencies within the US government are spying on your messages, well, then frankly, you are not paying enough attention to the news. However, all that can be in the past because with Sekur, they have awesome proprietary technology that has all your messages and all your emails actually go through Switzerland as they're making their way back and forth between you and your recipient. And so let's say you're here in America and the person you're messaging is over in Canada, Mexico, or anywhere else in the world. Well, it doesn't matter because all your messages are actually going through Switzerland back and forth from one to another, meaning that they are not subject to the Cloud Act and they are only subject to Swiss laws, which are some of the safest in the entire world. Their technology is awesome, it's proprietary, and they're a company that actually cares about your freedom. They care about getting the facts out, which is why they sponsor a company like ours. And best of all, they are offering a 25% off deal for our viewers, for the viewers of Facts Matter. So head on over to Sekur.com and use promo code Roman to get 25% off. And the rates are not even that expensive to start with. It's only $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and messenger combo. And they even offer a 7-day free trial. So again, head on over to Sekur.com, use promo code Roman, save some money, and support an awesome sponsor. In fact, this time last year, the State Supreme Court of Wisconsin, they upheld a ban on these drop boxes for the primary elections. Although in that particular ban, it was not permanent, but it was a tacit acknowledgement that those boxes were very likely unconstitutional, which is what the report states as well. However, getting back to the Mark Zuckerberg portion and the portion about his money, the report goes on to say that the Zuckerberg Five, which again refer to those 5 different counties that we laid out earlier, they violated the, quote, federal and state constitutional guarantee of equal protection. The grant money targeted specific voters for special voting privileges to the disadvantage of similarly situated voters located in other Wisconsin counties. Now, in this regard, the report actually then went on to detail evidence of how these 5 counties allow private groups working with the granting organization, which is, of course, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, to, quote, unlawfully administer aspects of the election, including in one county where one organization was unlawfully embedded in local government election administration. Just consider the implications there. This sub-organization that's connected to the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which itself is an organization staffed primarily by progressive, I imagine, Democrats, is being actually embedded into the election system to help out. Now, there were other issues that were highlighted in this report as well, such as how, for one, the Wisconsin Elections Commission issued illegal directives which allowed local officials to ignore the actual laws that were on the books governing the elections within nursing homes. Now, we actually did discuss that aspect in greater detail. I'll throw the links to that earlier episode down into the description box below. However, this report also went on to say that non-citizens were allowed to remain on Wisconsin voting rolls despite the fact that this was against the law. And the report goes on and on, listing problem after problem like this that were discovered in the 2020 election. But the best part is that this report, even though it's several months old, well, these problems have yet to be fixed. Meaning that if you live in the state of Wisconsin at least, well, reading this report will give you an idea of what you have to look forward to in the upcoming presidential race in 2024. If you'd like to read the report for yourself in its entirety, I'll throw the PDF version of it down into the description box below this video so you can read through it for yourself. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.